My name is Michael Wood. Since the age of 17, I've been willing to die in service to my community. In the U.S. Marine Corps, I was Sergeant Wood.
Michael Wood spent 11 years in the Baltimore Police Department.
Michael Wood is a very honest individual. He was not liked by the Baltimore City Police because he didn't play the good old boy network game.
As my career developed, I set out to understand why people offend, instead of how they offend.
The reason why these consent decrees don't do anything is because there's no enforcement or changing of the mechanism of incentives for the officers. So all you're doing is talking about it.
I certainly was going to cross. I was ready to shoot if I had to, but I was never going to cross that line.
But you kind of wanted to shoot.
Sure. Get what you inspect, not what you expect.
So, or anywhere that's populated, is your metric is based off of arrest. So you don't actually go out and engage with the community, because that would be time that you could be getting the arrest that you're expected to get to prove that you're a decent officer. So you actually don't have any incentive to communicate.
Michael, we should be looking for goals to not have people end up in the criminal justice system. Instead, every solution we have is to push them into the criminal justice system.
It should not be up to Jeff Sessions to determine how Baltimore Police Department operates. It should be up to the residents of Baltimore. Jeff Sessions doesn't know anything about policing, never has and never will.
I want to read a quote that you gave the Washington Post, which struck me. You said, "When you work in policing, you're inundated early on with the us versus them mentality. It's ingrained in you that this is a war, and if someone isn't wearing a uniform, they're the enemy. It just becomes part of who you are, of how you do your job."
What I'm trying to say is that we are looking at people who are doing nothing new, and if we focus on the actions, then we can fix the things for next time. Because when you focus on people, we end up thinking we can chop the head off, they put a new person in and something will change. But if we don't focus on the methodologies and the institutions, then we will be
put them in a prison cell, do the paperwork, go back out and do it again. So what we really need is to change the incentives and disincentives so that no matter what the role, we're still going towards that objective that actually serves.
More occupation, more vehicles, if your answer continues to be violent, because we have to understand that everything about policing is inherently violent. I have come in there with authority and told you what you will do.
It's like society thinks the cop should do what he did, which it's like, get back to that argument that I have that maybe I don't think training is the case. Like, we keep talking about training, but like this intense training discussion is completely wrapped around the idea of how to mitigate cops walking around with a mandate of comply or die.
Yeah,
and if we go into a world where we don't have the mandate of comply or die, I don't think we need this training. I don't think we need to take regular people. You don't need to train a meter maid on how to talk to a 6'4" white dude who is yelling at her because he doesn't want the ticket. Like, she'll talk her way out of that. Violence isn't an option.
No, that's exactly right.
Like, so violence is easy to go to when it's your, like, how many times have you seen cops in any of these videos or any scenario where you're watching them and they pull their gun out, like to do a car stop or anything like that, or they even touch for the gun? So that's going for the most extreme violence. When on the little bat belt is their taser, is their pepper spray, is their baton, is their own bare hands. So there's all these other escalations that you're supposed to have, but they go straight to the gun.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one that looks the coolest on the dash cam video.
You know, you say those things are jokes, but I don't think you're necessarily like far off. I mean, I have seen cops hold a gun sideways.
Yeah, exactly. That's ooh.
So don't anybody tell me that cops are trained or having some kind of idea. I've seen them shooting guns sideways thinking that they were gangsters being cool.
Let me ask this, because there was another article in the Times that was talking about a group or some individuals advocating for a sort of NTSB system for policing where, the National Transportation Safety Board investigates certain types of accidents, plane crashes, whatever, as a matter
Are
of
you sure
course.
somebody did that? That wasn't me.
Yeah, no. The article, I forgot who was involved, but one of the persons was another father who lost his son in a police shooting of a white unarmed child, and he is sort of part of this attempt to advocate for this idea of creating like a safety board that investigates what happens and implements protocols to prevent that happening in the future.
I absolutely 100% completely agree. I think that is how every single police shooting should be handled. I think you should have a national NTHSA, what is it, National Highway Traffic Safety Board?
Yeah.
To do those kind of things, because they do a complete reconstruction. They figure out every last thing and then figure out how to implement policies to make sure that particular thing never happens again. It's a process of elimination. In policing, we make the exact same mistakes over and over and over and over and over again. So I think that would be super huge. And then I would want that on a lower level on each individual department. I think all uses of force should be done the exact same way with a small team that is within the agency. Not, so then you have the more serious things from a national.
So let me ask this, because I feel like there's a tendency, right, when police are accused of wrongdoing, where the police just sort of clamp down and everything they do is always justified, and there's never anything wrong with the way they operate or the way they make decisions.
Yeah, because we have an adversarial system.
No, yeah, and I understand that. And so,
so when you pit the police department against the city, yeah, of course, you're going to end up in an adversarial position. So we have to have some way. That's why I think we have to reboot it. You can't keep those things in. You get into the mental health issues with cops. Cops don't get mental health training because it ruins their career. You don't get counseling because it ruins your career. You don't do these things where you can admit flaw. Like, I think, for instance, Betty Shelby should have probably been able to go in there and break down and be like, I was completely afraid. I realized how that was ridiculous. And we should all rally around that and figure out how we never put people in that situation again, to make sure that there never is that occurring.
So in light of that, do you think even a reform like that is impossible in today's system?
Yeah, I think it would be possible to do the Highway Traffic Safety Board thing. But my problem is because of the fundamental structure, we will find out truths, but we won't change anything, because if you don't change those fundamental layers of aligning the input and the output incentivizations to actually be with the community, then you're always going to have everything circumvented by the primary directives of policing, which is the creation and maintenance of oppressed classes.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, for me, kind of one of those moments where it's sort of a question of how people make themselves subject to power, because my experience in journalism, right, covering the persons who are on the other side of the law, right? They have a certain perspective about what the police do. And then there are obviously the activist classes who have a certain perspective about the way race colors the structures in our society. But there
is reality, but
no, yeah. And so, but speaking to the people in the community who are the persons who might call the police, the homeowners, the business owners, I feel like those persons, as much as they hate instances of police brutality and are personally affected, by the news of those events, I do think that the message they generally send police is one of, I want strong and strict enforcement, right? Like, I've had people say the police need to be stopping and frisking people. And these are like, middle-class African Americans.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, I get on this all the time, that it's okay for victims to have that mentality. We cannot codify that into our operations. We have to have police who are hearing the other 99% of the community say, yeah, you're right, but we need to look at this from a big picture perspective and do things in a way that's going to protect everybody and make sure we do things so you don't get robbed again, not that we just punish the offender. Like, it would be on us to explain why that is valid for them, but not something that we can do as the enforcement wing of the state.
But we know that in
That
our
makes sense?
system, like the police are essentially political pawns, right? And they're part of a political system. The people who ultimately hold the levers of power with respect to policing are elected officials. And so it's not clear to me that in light of that, in a democratic context, that where government is supposedly by the people, and I do think in a place like Baltimore, you have government largely reflective of the values of the voting population, which is not like largely progressive activist types by any stretch of the imagination. It's actually a pretty conservative city. And so I think that's why in Baltimore you see the sorts of policies that you get from African-American elected officials that trend in, I mean, frankly, in the direction at this point of zero tolerance, right? Like a mandatory minimum.
Elite. So everyone's wrong in thinking that.
No, I agree, but I feel like
going to execute elite supremacy.
No,
so
but my point is that
I get where you're going, though.
I just feel like until we, as members of our society, are prepared to stop sending the message that we want protection first and foremost, right? It's almost like we have to be willing to put ourselves on the line and step off that ledge of fear. Yeah, but I don't think in our political context it will work any other way, because I don't think the police can lead on this issue because of their role as essentially political instruments. So they're always beholden to our fears.
The leaders of policing have a responsibility to reframe that entire discussion. It is on us to say that, because we're not asking how we frame it now is what would you like us to do to them to prevent burglaries? And that's the wrong idea. What would you like us to do to you and your children to prevent burglaries? And that's what we codify.
But is it the police framing it, or is it society and therefore the community framing it that way? Because I think the community frames it in those terms and says, we want you to do X to those people. Yeah, I'm just saying when police try to reframe it, society eventually pushes back, right? I know that they don't, but just hypothetically. I do think that society eventually, if they feel like crime is on the rise or whatever, I don't think it's an accident that any number of Baltimore politicians feel like now is an acceptable time to attempt to pass a mandatory minimum law. And I do think that a not insignificant portion of their constituency wants exactly that kind of response to what is happening in Baltimore right now.
Well, yeah, so that certainly relies on somebody like me being right in that all the data says that we achieve reductions in crime, not because of policing, but despite policing. We have numerous examples of police saying they're not going to do anything anymore, and then crime goes down and the neighborhood actually gets safer. So, yeah, I'm going to need some time for that to work, and I don't think that it's plausible that when we make those changes and align those incentives, that crime will go up. There's no indication anywhere in research that would lead me to believe that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not challenging the sort of underlying objective facts or likelihood. Yeah, my concern is that our political context doesn't operate on the basis of objective factual findings, right? It's a democracy, and so it operates on the basis of majority rule, which is essentially mob rule. And so when the mob feels unsafe, they want the boys in blue with guns. They want the jump out boys.
Right. So I get that. People. So this is like even kind of come full circle to my involvement in Black Lives Matter, where I get a lot of people that will push back and say, "Who is a white guy to tell us about how we should reform policing?"
Yeah, how dare you, white man?
I have to just be aggressive about it and be like, look, you are the number one determiner of the outputs that you want and what outcomes you see. But because you are the consumer of the product, doesn't mean you have any idea how it's manufactured. So the professionals of manufacturing, just like doctors need to have a Hippocratic oath, like that's what we need. We need to have serious leaders, scholars, to lead police departments and change that narrative to know what is best. I mean, this is why we have education and we invest people with authority figures.
Wait a minute,
why
Michael.
Civilian-led policing is not a democracy.
Wait a minute, Michael. I have at least 30 Twitter followers. Are you really telling me I'm not an expert on whatever I choose to talk about?
I am certainly telling you that. And I'm even going a little bit farther because I tell every single police chief and manager in this country they don't know what they're doing.
That is true. How's that working out, by the way?
Well, nobody's stepping up to tell me that I'm wrong.
Well, yeah, that's true. I think that's a win.
I mean, that's just a hard pill. I think that's we're trying to do the hardest thing that any educator can do, which is to break a previously held mental schema.
No, I
That's
agree.
the hardest thing that anyone can do. So that is what we are trying to all do right now, is break down something that elite supremacy in this country has put into our culture. It's put into our souls from day one. I mean, we've talked about the reason I became a cop was watching cops be glorified on TV as heroes. And it is the hero who hesitates to pull the trigger is what I ended up learning. You know, that's the saying that I've been saying for these last few years. Is the hero is that hesitates. Dinkheller's a hero for that. That's what a hero is. A hero isn't the coward that pulls the trigger.
No, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And that's what I was thinking earlier today, is that obviously, you know, it was a tragic loss, but classically the idea of heroism always involved dying young. I mean, it was just part of what it is. And the heroic act here was exactly that, the refusal to take another life, even at the sacrifice of one's own. And in that way, you know, I feel like as much as I understand, you know, the grief that underlies the message, you know, I feel like something is being lost about the heroism that Dinkheller did display in this encounter.
Yeah, I totally agree with you without question.